bringing you our stimulus updates, stimulus checks updates. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the George Floyd protest and a little perspective about poverty as well. Welcome to the C2C community. This is a real estate mentorship community. And please, if you've already subscribed to our channel, thank you so much. And if you've not done so, please do so. On my last video, I talked about the report from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis showing data for April with a 12.9 increase in disposable income and a 33% increase in personal savings. I talked about the fact that these numbers could affect the outcome of the future stimulus package, which is the HEROES Act. In this video, I will take a look at poverty, George Floyd protests and riots, and what relationship this could have with a stimulus bailout. The Emergency Money for People's Act at $2,000 a month for 6 months, proposed by Congressman Ro Khanna, extends the stimulus checks to more Americans, this time 16 years of age and older, making $130,000 and below can get $2,000. Congressman Ro Khanna, who proposed the Emergency Money for People Act, argued, he said, Americans need sustained cash infusion for the duration of this crisis in order to come out of the other side alive, healthy, and ready to go back to work. It is time for Congress to get to work. It is time for Congress to give a handout to the people due to the coronavirus pandemic. How can stimulus bailouts get rid of poverty in America? I guess that would be the question. The recent killing of George Floyd and the demonstrations that have rocked almost every major city in America and the world can also be put into perspective with regards to stimulus, bailouts, and poverty. Perhaps Frederick Douglass puts it better by saying, the thing worse than rebellion is the thing that causes rebellion. I read an article today on The Atlantic titled, The Double Standard of the American Riot. The nationwide protest against the killing of George Floyd has been called un-American by critics, but rebellion has always been used to defend liberty. When our forefathers fought for independence from the British, violence was the clarion call. Popular phrases such as, live free or die, give me liberty or give me death, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Black protests have never been associated with allegiance to the American democracy. The riots rocking major streets in America today is due to the continuous police brutality and killings. The killing of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor, and more. Yet, when Americans took out to the streets, they are referred to as thugs and looters and claims of unpatriotism. This philosophy of force and violence to obtain freedom has long been the backbone of the American democracy by white people, but totally denied to African Americans for so long. Perhaps Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela puts it even better by saying, overcoming poverty is not an act of charity, it is an act of justice. Putting the Emergency Money for People's Act stimulus plan and how this could help eradicate poverty in America, I think is something to talk about. The Emergency Money for People's Act proposes a $2,000 a month for 6 months, extendable to 12 months. This is retroactive to March 2020, to 3 months after the end of the coronavirus pandemic. This has been greatly endorsed by Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders. There is a greater chance of poor people looting during a riot because poverty causes violence and not vice versa. How can a general bailout of $2,000 a month contribute in fighting the underlying issues of police brutality, racial discrimination, judicial reforms, underfunded black schools, white supremacy, and more? And a universal basic income reduce the odds of violence. In the US today, there are about 39 million people who are considered poor, meaning living under the poverty line. Can the US consider some kind of a sustained income support for the poor if they really want to solve the underlying issues facing the riots on the streets in the US today? If this can be done, this will go a long way to provide opportunities for the people who have been underserved for a very long time. And this will uplift communities, and people will be able to get jobs, people will be able to go to school. Some people will argue that a universal bailout will not solve the problem of poverty, but yes, it would uplift so many people out of poverty. What does a $2,000 a month poverty elevation stimulus plan for 6 to 12 months look like? $2,000 a month times 39 million poor people in America will cost about $78 billion a month. $78 billion a month times 12 months will cost almost $1 trillion, which is equals to about 5% of the US economy to have zero poverty. Why don't we try this experiment for 6 months and see how it goes? The Marshall Plan, which was a US aid initiative to a European recovery program to help countries in Europe recover from the destruction of World War II. In 1948, it cost about $13.3 billion. And if you adjust the dollar value today for inflation, it will be about 103 to 104 billion. The Vietnam War cost the US $789.5 billion. The Korean War cost the US $364.8 billion. The war on terror, Iraq and Afghanistan, cost the US $5.6 trillion. Every American has spent about $24,000 on the war on terror. A poverty elevation stimulus bailout is possible for America. When you look at the percentage of the American budget, it will take 5%. And if you look at how much America has been spending in wars, poverty elevation will solve the underlying issues of racial discrimination, underfunded school, and provide opportunities to many Americans. Perhaps attempts to solve the opportunity gap between the whites and the black, programs like affirmative action has brought about much resentment, as most whites see it as a free ticket for black people. Perhaps the Tuskegee experiment from 1932 to 1972, where the US Public Health Service conducted an experiment involving over 400 black men who were injected with syphilis to trace the spontaneous evolution of the disease in black people. The men were never told they had syphilis nor warned about the effects of the disease. They were deceived. They were involved in a government experiment for bad blood. After 40 years of the experiment, about more than 100 of the black men died. The Tuskegee experiment was a logical aftermath of race relations and the degradation of the blacks in America. But where do we go from here? Perhaps John Hope Bryan said it better in his book titled How the Poor Can Save Capitalism. In chapter 1, Separate and Unequal America, John says, we must move from a legacy of civil rights justice for a few to what he calls civil rights empowerment for all. Ensuring financial literacy and economic opportunity is the new civil rights issue for this generation. Civil rights is simply building a strong financial, economic, educational strength which serves as your defense system for discrimination. Perhaps President Jimmy Carter puts it in a more better perspective. Silence can be as deadly as violence. Perhaps the riots, violence, the looting after George Floyd's murder could be traced back to the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, where the city's black district of Greenwood, featuring luxury apartments, shops, restaurants, bars, bowling alleys, was attacked by white mobs, leading to property destruction. About 1,000 black homes were burned down. Hundreds of black residents died in what was known as the Black Wall Street. On his last Sunday sermon, Dr. Martin Luther King talked about remaining awake through a revolution. He cited a story from Washington Irving's book entitled Rip Van Winkle. Rip went up to the mountain and stayed for 20 years. This story was not just about the fact that Rick went up to the mountain and stayed for 20 years, but when Rick was going to that mountain, he saw there was a big picture just as he walked into the mountain. That was a picture of King George III of England. And after 20 years of sleeping, when he got up, when he was leaving the mountain, he saw that same picture, but it was the picture of George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. So Rip Van Winkle did not only sleep in the mountain for 20 years, Rip Van Winkle slept through a revolution. So many people are living through a period of social change, yet they fail to develop the new mental attitudes, the new mental responses that the new situation demands. There is a great revolution happening right now in America, yet some of us are still sleeping. Dr. King warned, we must all learn to live as brothers or die together as fools. Racial injustice is still a black man's burden and a white man's shame. There is nothing more urgent for America than to persistently and unrelentlessly work to get rid of the disease of racism. Dr. King also talked about the myth on the over-reliance on the bootstrap mentality. He said, there are some who say if the Negro is to rise out of discrimination and segregation, he must lift himself by his own bootstraps. Those who say this never realize that the black man was kept in slavery for 244 years. And in 1863, after the Emancipation Proclamation, the black man was set free. He was not given any money, any land, no education, penniless and poor. Meanwhile, at the same time, there was an act of Congress giving millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest to European farm settlers who came to the shores to America. They were not only given land, they were given training, they were given subsidies, they were given low interest rates for them to be able to work on their mechanized farms. And yet, these are the very people who are asking the black man to lift himself by his own bootstraps. How can a bootless man lift up himself from his own bootstraps? I guess the question will be, who am I to suggest about a poverty elevation stimulus plan for America? Coming from Africa, where everything seemed to have gone wrong, where most of the sub-Saharan African states are tied in this inescapable chain of poverty, malnutrition, wars, diseases, corruption. And yes, it is for these same reasons that I came to America to seek for the great American dream. That you can come here, work hard on a level playing field, and you will be successful, as enshrined in the 1776 constitutional right, namely life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the true genius of the American dream. Barack Obama said in 2004 at the Democratic National Convention, "No other country in the world is my story possible. My parents will give me an African name, Barack, knowing that in a tolerant America, your name is no barrier to success. In a generous America, you do not have to be rich to achieve your potential. That we can say all we think, write what we think without a knock on our doors." The audacity of hope. The hope that a skinny kid with a funny name also believe that America has a place for him too. They believe that there are better days ahead. And they believe that we can reclaim young citizens across cities in America from violence and despair. As we stand at the crossroads of history, we can make the right choices and meet the challenges that face us by doing what is right. Maybe it's time for us to stop sleeping through a revolution. Maybe if we had looked beyond Colin Kaepernick's knee protests, we would have not find ourselves in this situation today. Maybe it is time to look beyond the protests and riots and find a common ground, which I think will be an opportunity for America to come out from the disease of racism. The second stimulus bill, the second stimulus check, some people are arguing is a band-aid, like Senator Ro Khanna and Tim Ryan. They believe only a sustained economic package to the American people will take them out of this misery. And I also think we can equate this to poverty elevation. If we can provide stimulus package for America to come out of this economic hardship, we may as well think of the option of providing a poverty elevation stimulus plan sustained, which will help to solve the underlying issues which is facing all major streets in America today with riots and protests. We are still hoping that Congress will pass the second stimulus bill. The president has said they will pass a bill, so we are just waiting now to see what that package would look like. Please, if you have not subscribed to our channel, please do so And thank you so much. If you have already subscribed, please let us know in the comments what other topic you may want us to talk about. Thank you.